I arrived 5 minutes early, which was intentional. Morgan Sinclair valued punctuality the way royalty valued bloodlines, and if she was going to pretend I didn't belong in her family, I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of calling me rude too. The restaurant loomed ahead of me, all glass and gold, the kind of place where reservations were made weeks in advance, and people like me were expected to feel grateful just to step inside. I pushed through the doors anyway, shoulders back, expression calm, already rehearsing the polite smile I would wear through whatever passive-aggressive performance awaited me tonight. The maitre d' barely looked at me before offering a thin, professional smile. "Reservation name?" "Claire Sinclair," I said evenly. "I'm meeting a party already seated." His fingers moved across the screen, quick and practiced. Then he paused. A flicker of hesitation crossed his face before it settled into something more formal, more distant. "I'm sorry, madam, but there's no reservation under that name." I blinked once, slow and deliberate. "That's not possible. My husband's family is already here." He nodded politely, the kind of nod designed to end conversations. "There is a reservation under Morgan Sinclair, party of 6, but I don't see your name attached." Before I could respond, a familiar voice sliced cleanly through the air behind me. "Oh, Claire." I turned. Morgan stood a few feet away, draped in elegance and superiority, her lips curved into a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Behind her, the table was exactly as I imagined, Adam seated stiffly, Charlotte whispering something behind her glass, Emma pretending not to notice anything at all. Morgan tilted her head. "Did you really think you were invited?" There it was. Not subtle, not even disguised, just clean, deliberate exclusion. "I was under the impression this was a family dinner," I said. Her smile sharpened. "It is." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, crowded with everything she wasn't saying out loud. "You're not family." "You never were." I felt the sting of it. Of course I did. I wasn't made of stone. But humiliation only works if you accept the role assigned to you. And I had spent far too long playing small to keep the peace. Behind her, Adam shifted in his seat. Our eyes met for half a second before he looked away. That told me everything. Morgan let out a soft, amused breath. "Honestly, Claire, I didn't think you'd actually show up. Places like this can be uncomfortable if you're not used to them." Charlotte laughed under her breath. Emma stayed quiet. Adam said nothing. The room seemed to tilt slightly, not from shock, but from clarity. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was planned, structured, executed, and witnessed. I could feel eyes on us now, other diners pretending not to watch, the staff carefully neutral, the low hum of conversation shifting just enough to make space for the scene unfolding at the entrance. Morgan took a step closer, lowering her voice just enough to feel intimate. "I'm sure you'll be more comfortable there." For a moment, I said nothing, not because I didn't have something to say, but because I was deciding who I was going to be tonight. The version of me she expected, the quiet one, the accommodating one, the woman who swallowed every insult and called it patience, would have nodded, maybe forced a smile and left before things got worse. But that version of me had been fading for a long time, and tonight, she was gone. I smiled, not politely, not defensively, but slowly, deliberately, like I had just been handed a script I had no intention of following. Then I turned back to the maitre d'. "Would you be so kind," I said smoothly, "as to let the owner know that Claire is here?" There was a pause, a real one this time. Morgan let out a short laugh, sharp and disbelieving. "Oh, this should be good." I didn't look at her. The maitre d' hesitated, clearly weighing whether this was worth escalating. "I'm not sure that will be." "It will," I said gently. "He'll want to know." Something in my tone must have landed because after a brief moment, he nodded and stepped away. Morgan crossed her arms. "You really think the owner of this restaurant is going to come out for you?" I finally met her gaze again. I don't think, I said. I know. Behind her, Adam shifted again, tension pulling at his posture. I could see the questions forming in his expression, the uncertainty he wasn't brave enough to voice. Good. Let him wonder. Let all of them wonder. Morgan's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, but she recovered quickly. This is embarrassing, Claire. For you? I asked lightly. Her eyes narrowed. Before she could respond, a voice carried across the room. Claire? I turned, and there he was. Daniel Laurent stepped forward with the kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself. Conversation softened as he passed, attention bending naturally in his direction. But when his eyes landed on me, the formality in his expression shifted into something warmer. Familiar. Real. It's been a while, he said. It has, I replied. Behind me, I could feel the entire table go still. Morgan didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. And for the first time since I walked in, the balance of the room tilted, not toward her carefully constructed world of control and hierarchy, but toward me. Daniel's gaze moved past me, taking in the scene with a quiet precision that missed nothing. Morgan's posture, rigid and defensive. Adam's silence, heavy and telling. The untouched place settings, the subtle imbalance at a table that was meant for 6, but somehow only seated 5. When his eyes returned to mine, the warmth was still there, but something sharper had settled beneath it. What seems to be the issue? He asked calmly. I let out a soft breath, as if the situation were mildly inconvenient, rather than deliberately cruel. It appears there was a misunderstanding with the reservation. I wasn't included. Daniel's expression didn't change immediately, but I saw it, the slight tightening at the corners of his eyes, the shift in his stance. He understood, not just the words, but everything underneath them. Morgan stepped forward before he could respond, her smile snapping back into place like a well-practiced mask. There's no misunderstanding, she said lightly. This is a private family dinner. Daniel turned his attention to her, polite but unreadable. I see. She must have assumed she was invited, Morgan continued, her tone almost sympathetic now, which somehow made it worse. An easy mistake. I tilted my head slightly, watching her. She was trying to regain control of the narrative, to shrink what she had done into something small, something deniable. Daniel didn't look convinced. Regardless, he said smoothly, we don't leave guests standing at the entrance. Morgan let out a soft laugh. Guests, of course. But as I said, this is a closed reservation. There was a pause. Then Daniel spoke, his voice still calm, but now carrying just enough weight to shift the air again. Claire isn't just a guest. Silence fell, clean and immediate. Morgan's smile faltered. I'm sorry? He gestured toward me, casual but definitive. She's family. The word landed harder than anything else that had been said tonight. Charlotte's glass stilled midair. Emma blinked, confusion breaking through her careful neutrality. Adam finally looked up, really looked, his eyes searching my face like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. Morgan, however, recovered quickly. She always did. I think there's been some confusion, she said, her tone cooling. Claire is my son's wife. That's the extent of it. I smiled faintly. That's one way to put it. Daniel glanced between us, then back at the maitre d', who had returned quietly and was now waiting for instruction. Prepare a seat, he said. Morgan's composure cracked, just slightly. Excuse me? Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Claire will be joining the table. This is ridiculous, Morgan snapped, the polish slipping. You can't just rearrange a private reservation because she decided to. What exactly is this? A stunt? I met her gaze, steady and unbothered. If I wanted to make a scene, Morgan, I wouldn't have waited this long. That hit. Not loudly, but precisely. Daniel allowed a faint smile, then turned back to the staff. Make sure she's comfortable. The maitre d' nodded immediately. Of course. Within seconds, a chair was adjusted, a place setting added with seamless efficiency. The table that had been carefully arranged to exclude me now made space as if it had always been there. I stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately. every step closing the gap she had tried to create. As I reached the table, I paused beside Adam. He looked up at me, something uncertain flickering across his face. Guilt, maybe, or realization. "Hi," I said softly. "Claire," he started, but the word fell apart before it became anything meaningful. I didn't wait for him to finish. Instead, I took my seat, right next to him, across from Morgan. The symmetry of it wasn't lost on anyone. A waiter appeared almost instantly, placing a pristine napkin in my lap, filling my glass without being asked. The service was impeccable, but more importantly, it was equal, exactly equal. Morgan watched all of it with tightening fingers wrapped around her wine glass. "You seem very comfortable," she said finally. "I am," I replied simply. Charlotte cleared her throat, trying to diffuse the tension. "So, Claire, I didn't know you'd been here before." "I have," I said, picking up my glass. "Quite a few times, actually." Emma frowned slightly. "Just not as a guest." That caught their attention. Morgan's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" I took a slow sip of wine before answering, letting the silence stretch just enough to pull them in. "Before I married Adam, I worked in fine dining." Charlotte blinked. "You were a waitress?" I smiled, not offended. "That's usually where people start." Daniel, still standing nearby, let out a quiet chuckle. "That's not where she stayed." Morgan didn't look pleased. "I'm sure it was a valuable learning experience." "It was," I said calmly. "I learned exactly how this world works." "And yet," she replied, leaning back in her chair, "some people still don't quite belong in it." There it was again, the line she never stopped trying to draw. I set my glass down gently. "Belonging is an interesting concept." "Oh?" Morgan said. "Yes." I folded my hands lightly on the table. "Some people think it's inherited. Others understand it's earned." A flicker of irritation crossed her face. "And which do you think applies to you?" Before I could answer, Daniel spoke. "Claire trained under me," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "Straight out of culinary school." The table went still again. Morgan blinked. "I'm sorry?" "She wasn't just staff," he continued. "She was one of the most capable people I've ever worked with." Charlotte's eyes widened slightly. Emma leaned forward. "Wait, seriously?" I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Daniel had already shifted the ground beneath them. Morgan let out a short, dismissive laugh, but it didn't carry the same confidence as before. "That's surprising." "Is it?" I asked. Her gaze snapped back to mine. "Given your background?" "Yes." I held her stare. "You don't actually know my background, Morgan?" That landed. Harder this time. Because it was true. For all her judgments, all her assumptions, she had never once asked who I was before I became her son's wife. She had simply decided. And now, for the first time, that certainty was slipping. The waiter returned with a small, beautifully plated dish, placing it in front of me. "Compliments of the chef." I glanced up. "Thank you." Morgan's lips pressed into a thin line. "Of course." I picked up my fork, taking my time, aware of every eye still lingering on me. Then I took a bite and smiled. Not because of the food, but because the balance had shifted. And this time, it wasn't temporary. The silence that followed wasn't accidental. It stretched, deliberate and fragile, like something none of them quite knew how to interrupt without making it worse. I let it sit there, undisturbed, as I finished my bite and set my fork down with quiet precision. Morgan was the first to move. She always was. "Well," she said, smoothing her napkin as if resetting the moment, "connections are certainly useful in certain professions." There was a faint emphasis on the last word, just enough to remind everyone what she thought of mine. I glanced at her, almost amused. "Connections help," I agreed, "but they're not what keeps you at the table." Charlotte shifted in her seat. Emma stared at her plate. Adam reached for his glass again, though it was already full. Morgan tilted her head. "No? And what does?" "Value," I said simply. Her lips curved, but there was no warmth in it. "And you believe you bring that?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I picked up my wine, taking a slow sip, letting the question linger just long enough to become uncomfortable. Then I set the glass down. "I don't believe it," I said. "I know it." Adam exhaled quietly beside me. Morgan noticed. Of course she did. Her gaze flicked to him, then back to me, recalculating. Confidence is admirable, she said. Misplaced confidence, less so. I leaned back slightly in my chair, completely at ease. You've mistaken me before, Morgan. I wouldn't recommend making it a habit. That did it. The temperature at the table dropped a few degrees. Charlotte let out a small, nervous laugh. Okay, this is getting intense. No, Morgan said softly, her eyes still locked on mine. It's getting honest. Then, let's be honest. Emma looked between us, clearly unsure whether she wanted to hear what came next. Morgan folded her hands. By all means. I glanced briefly at Adam, then back at her. You don't like me, I said. Charlotte inhaled sharply. Emma froze. Morgan didn't flinch. I've never hidden that. No, I agreed. You've been very consistent. Adam shifted uncomfortably. Claire, maybe this isn't. I raised a hand slightly, not even looking at him. It's fine. He fell silent again. Predictable. I returned my attention to Morgan. You decided early on that I wasn't good enough. Not for your family. Not for your son. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. And you think that judgment was baseless? I think it was convenient, I said. A pause. What does that mean? She asked. It means, I continued calmly, it was easier for you to dismiss me than to understand me. Charlotte looked down at her lap. Emma pressed her lips together. Morgan let out a soft, incredulous breath. You're giving yourself a lot of importance. I shook my head slightly. No, I'm giving your behavior context. That landed deeper than the others, because it wasn't emotional. It was precise. Morgan's fingers tightened slightly against the tablecloth. And what context is that? I met her gaze evenly. Control. The word hung there. Sharp. Uncomfortable. True. She laughed, but it came out thinner than before. You think this is about control? I think everything with you is about control, I said. Adam muttered under his breath, Claire, but I continued. You control the invitations, the conversations, the narrative. I gestured lightly around the table. Even tonight, this wasn't about dinner. It was about making a point. Morgan's eyes flashed. And what point would that be? That I don't belong, I said. Silence. Then, and don't you? She asked quietly. There it was, the core of it. Stripped of politeness, stripped of pretense. Just the question she had been asking from the very beginning. I didn't hesitate. I belong exactly where I choose to be, I said. Charlotte looked up at that. Emma blinked. Morgan studied me, searching for something. Uncertainty, maybe. Weakness. She didn't find it. And you've chosen this? She asked. For now, I said. That answer unsettled her more than anything else. Because it implied something she hadn't considered. That this, her family, her world, wasn't something I was desperate to keep. What is that supposed to mean? I turned to him slowly. It means, I said, that staying in a place where you're not respected is a choice. He went still. Morgan's gaze flicked between us, something new forming behind her eyes. Interest. Calculation. Are you unhappy, Claire? She asked, almost softly now. I held her gaze. Then I smiled. Not anymore. The answer confused her. Good. Before she could respond, Daniel returned briefly to the table, speaking quietly with the staff, before giving me a small nod. Everything all right? His expression seemed to ask. I gave the slightest incline of my head. Everything was more than all right. He stepped away again, leaving us exactly where we were, mid-shift, mid-collapse of a dynamic that had gone unchallenged for far too long. Morgan leaned back in her chair, reassessing. You've changed, she said. I've stopped pretending, I corrected. And what exactly were you pretending to be? Acceptable, I said. That one hit clean. Adam looked down at his hands. Charlotte didn't speak. Emma exhaled slowly. Morgan's expression hardened, but beneath it, I could see something else now. Not anger, not quite. Uncertainty, because the version of me she had built her judgments around no longer existed, and she didn't yet know what to do with the one sitting in front of her. You're being dramatic, she said finally. I was being quiet. A beat passed. Then another. And for the first time since this dinner began, Morgan Sinclair didn't have an immediate response. So I picked up my fork again, completely unbothered, and took another bite. Because the conversation had already shifted where it needed to go, and we were only getting started. Morgan recovered the way she always did, by reaching for the one thing she trusted more than status or appearances: pressure. "Quiet doesn't suit you anymore," she said, voice smooth again, but tighter now. "It's almost as if you've forgotten your place entirely." I set my fork down, meeting her gaze without hesitation. "No," I said. "I've finally understood it." Her lips thinned. "And where exactly is that?" "Not beneath you," I said. Charlotte let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Emma shifted, her eyes darting briefly toward Adam, who looked like he was watching something unravel that he didn't know how to stop. Morgan's fingers curled lightly around her glass. "Confidence is one thing," she said, "but delusion is another." I tilted my head. "You keep hoping I'm guessing. And you keep implying you're not." "I'm not," I said calmly. That pause again, the kind that stretches just long enough to invite doubt. Morgan leaned forward slightly. "Then explain it to me, Claire. Explain why you believe you have any standing here beyond my son." There it was, her final angle. Reduce everything I was to Adam, make him the source, the center, the reason. I almost smiled. "Because," I said, my voice even, "your son isn't the reason I'm here." Adam flinched. "That's an interesting claim." "It's a factual one." Charlotte looked between us, confusion building. "Wait, what does that mean?" I didn't look at her. I kept my attention exactly where it belonged, on Morgan. "You've spent years assuming I married into this family for security." I continued, "For access, for comfort." "And didn't you?" she asked sharply. "No," I said. "I married Adam because I thought he was capable of being a partner." Adam's jaw tightened. "Claire." I didn't stop. "I was wrong?" Silence dropped hard across the table. Emma's eyes widened slightly. Charlotte looked down. Morgan didn't move. But something in her expression shifted. Subtle, but real. Interest turning into something closer to focus. "And yet," she said slowly, "you stayed." "I did," I agreed, "for longer than I should have." Adam's voice came out strained. "You're making this sound like the truth," I cut in, finally turning to him. "It is." He stared at me, searching for something to push back against. He didn't find it. Because there was nothing unclear about what I was saying. I turned back to Morgan. "You asked why I believe I have standing here." "Yes," she said. "It's because everything you think your son built," I paused just slightly, letting the words settle before I finished, "was built with me." That landed. Not loudly, but completely. Morgan blinked once, slow and controlled. "I'm sorry?" Charlotte frowned. "What? Wait. What do you mean?" Adam went very still. I held Morgan's gaze. His investments, his business growth, the capital he used to start all of it. Her expression didn't break, but it tightened. "Go on." "It came from me," I said. A beat, then another. "No," she said flatly. I didn't raise my voice. "Yes." "That's not possible." "It is." She shook her head slightly, like rejecting the idea would make it untrue. "Adam built his portfolio before you were even—" "No," I said. "He didn't." Adam finally spoke, his voice low. "Claire, stop." I looked at him, and for the first time all night, there was no softness in it. "No," I said. "You don't get to be comfortable now." Morgan's eyes snapped between us. "Adam?" He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I turned back to her. When Adam wanted to start investing seriously, he didn't have the capital. He had ideas, he had ambition, but he didn't have the foundation. Morgan's grip tightened. "And you're saying you provided it?" "I'm saying," I replied, "that without me, none of it would exist in the form you're so proud of." Charlotte whispered, "Oh my God." Emma sat back, stunned. Morgan's voice dropped, quieter now but far more dangerous. "If this is some kind of exaggeration, it's documented," I said. "Every transfer, every agreement, every percentage." Adam closed his eyes briefly. That told her everything. I watched the realization begin, not fully formed yet, but undeniable. The structure she believed in, shifting. "You're lying," she said, but there was less conviction in it now. I shook my head. "You never asked." That hit, because it was true. She had built an entire narrative about me without ever checking if it was real. "And you expect me to believe," she continued, "that you've been quietly, what, funding my son's success this entire time?" "I don't expect anything," I said. "I'm telling you." The difference mattered. Morgan leaned back slowly, reassessing everything in real time. "If that were true," she said, "you would have made it known." "No," I said, "I would have assumed it didn't need to be." Adam looked at me then, something like regret flickering across his face. "Too late." "Why are you saying this now?" Morgan asked. I held her gaze. "Because you tried to humiliate me," I said, "and you did it using a story that was never real." The table went completely silent. Even the surrounding noise of the restaurant felt distant now, contained, focused. "And what exactly are you implying?" she asked. "I'm not implying anything," I said. "I'm correcting you." A long pause followed. Then, Morgan exhaled slowly, her composure returning in pieces. "Even if I entertain this," she said, "it changes nothing about where you stand in this family." I almost laughed. "That's where you're wrong." Her eyes narrowed. "Is it?" "Because I'm not standing in it anymore. I'm being precise." I reached for my napkin, placing it neatly beside my plate before standing. No rush, no hesitation, just decision. "Daniel," I said as he approached subtly, already aware something had shifted. "Yes. Thank you for the hospitality." "Anytime," he replied, his gaze steady, understanding more than he said. I nodded once, then looked at Adam. "You can come with me," I said. A single chance. Clear, simple. He hesitated. Of course he did. His eyes flicked to Morgan, and in that moment, the answer was already there. I smiled slightly, not surprised. "Right," I said. Then I turned, walking away from the table, from the tension, from the version of my life that had just ended. Behind me, I could feel it. Morgan's silence, Adam's stillness, the collapse of a dynamic that had depended on me staying exactly where they put me. Outside, the night air felt different, lighter. My phone was already in my hand before I reached the car. One message. That's all it took. "We're moving forward. Start tomorrow." The reply came almost instantly. Understood. I didn't look back, because this time I wasn't leaving empty-handed.